Gentleman's recognized.
Strike last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me weigh in because I've had real problems in the past with this bill, and I continue to have problems with it. My problems are probably a little bit more basic than even this amendment expresses, but I support the amendment. And I want to start by saying I don't have any animosity toward the rent-to-own business. It serves a useful purpose, and it allows people to get property and use it, and sometimes buy it, sometimes return it. The problem is that I don't know why we need a federal law on this. All of these transactions take place within a state, and all of the testimony that we've heard at multiple hearings say that when you have a lease and it is rented to own, if somebody takes the property across state lines, that in and of itself terminates the lease. So all of these transactions have historically, throughout the whole history of our nation, been handled by state law. That's why there's never been a federal statute on this, because these are not transactions that occur in interstate commerce.
Will the gentleman yield?
They are transactions that occur
Will the gentleman
in
yield?
intrastate. Let me just finish. You'll get your chance, and I'll be happy to yield to you. But I don't know why we are here, especially with my Republican colleagues who always tell me that they believe in states' rights, and they believe in federalism, as Mr. Lukemeyer says. You know, these inconsistencies in state law is a result of federalism. That's the form of government in which we operate, and the form of government in which the Republican Party has said over all of these years you support. And the Constitution says anything that's not specifically delegated to the states, to the federal government, belongs to the states.
Will you yield now? Will the gentleman yield?
Just let me finish,
All right.
and I'm going to yield to you. Be patient. Be patient. So here we are with a statute in an area that is a brand new federal preemption of all law, when it's not even about an interstate transaction. I don't understand why we're even considering this bill at the federal level. This is a uniquely state-by-state thing. Now, sometimes I live right on the South Carolina line, and sometimes in North Carolina there'll be a rent-to-own thing where somebody will try to take the property into South Carolina, and that in all of the leases terminates the lease and terminates the transaction. It's against the terms of the lease. All of the testimony said that. So why are we, the first question we got to address in this committee is, why do we need a federal statute, and why is a group of people who say they believe in small federal government all of a sudden trying to take over all of the law in an area where we have never have we had a statute, a federal statute, on this issue. It is just absolutely inconsistent with everything you stand for. Now, getting to the amendment says, okay, if you want to do that, go ahead and do it, but there are some states, 4 states, that have laws on the books that are superior, that provide greater rights to consumers than this federal preemption law that you are pushing would provide, and at least let those states continue to have their laws on the books. Those laws are Minnesota, Wisconsin, New Jersey, and Vermont. If you want to set a federal floor, which I think is ridiculous, because some states would like to have a lower federal floor, but if you want to set a federal floor, I think
the gentleman's recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
That would
the gentleman yield now for
that would be
answering the
consistent
question.
with the amendment. It won't be consistent with the next amendment, which I'm going to offer, which would restrict this to only interstate transactions, but it would be consistent with this amendment, and I think it's a good idea.
Well, the gentleman yield 10 seconds to the chair, and I'll
ask unanimous consent for an additional minute, and I'm going to yield to the Mr. Canseco first, and then I'll yield to the chairman. Go ahead.
Well, let me answer something here that's very important.
Consent.
First of all, this does not preempt any state law.
That is just absolutely.
No,
you all, we have debated this now 5 times, and I keep reading the language in the bill that
Will
says.
the gentleman yield back sometime so that I
Go
can
ahead.
answer your
Go
question?
ahead.
Answer your question very specifically and to the point. And by the way, I commend you for your republicanism. Incidentally, there are courts that are ruling against what states have recognized that these are not credit transactions.
That's just not true. Let
transactions.
me clear that up, since we're going to have a dialogue here. The Minnesota Rental Purchase Agreement Act, which has been interpreted by the courts to cover rent-to-own transactions, covers this transaction. The Wisconsin Consumer Act, this was a legislative passed bill. The courts have interpreted it to include these kinds of transactions. So when you say there's no state law on this, you're just absolutely wrong.
Well, then, will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 1 minute.
Thank
for
you.
this,
Well, the important thing to recognize is that that's precisely why the federal law needs to come in here in order to clarify it and set a floor. States are free.
All right, well, you ought to be supporting the amendment. That's exactly what the amendment does. The bill itself doesn't set a floor. It preempts all state law.
The gentleman yield back.
The amendment would allow you to preempt all state laws that are less onerous and but not water down the laws in the 4 states that have more aggressive consumer protection.
Gentleman yield.
Your time is almost over, and you said you would yield a few seconds.
I'm just trying to correct as he goes along the statements that this gentleman is making. I'm yielding to Mr. Canseco, but I don't want him to just misrepresent the facts.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No misrepresentation at all.
I'll yield back to the
very simple fact that states all recognize that these are pure leases, that they are not credit transactions.
Not these 4,
and
not these 2 states.
and imposing an APR on this thing, that incidentally APR is like trying to put food and drug on top of Foot Locker or something like that.
Reclaiming my time, because we're talking about Foot Lockers now. So
all right, we'll wrap this up.
I'll yield to the chairman.
You know, I would say this. We keep saying we can't take this property across state lines, and of course as we cross state lines, we've always been slowed by the backup of traffic where there are roadblocks and they're going through every automobile.
Oh, come on, Mr. Chairman. If I'm gonna yield to you, at least be serious about what you're talking about. This is serious business.
Well, I think on occasions there is property
whether
taken
traffic
across
is
state.
slow, you're not going to pick up a television and move it across state lines without violating one of these leases.
Yeah,
and for you all of disingenuous to say this ought to be federalized is just inconsistent with everything you say.
I didn't say any of that. I didn't say any of that. Regular order. All right, regular order. Mr. Neugenbauer, recognized 5 minutes, and our colleague just came off a 75-25 election thumping of his opponent. I thank the chairman and